The desert journey, ancient Near Eastern context, the weight of obedience, and the physics of faith. The servant puts his hand under the thigh of Abraham and swears. And then he prepares to go. In this session we are going to enter the physical, historical, and cultural world of this journey with an immersion that is as thorough as anything we have done in the theological and psychological dimensions. Because the God of the Bible is not a God of disembodied ideas. He is a God who works through specific physical realities, through desert terrain and waterskin construction and caravan logistics and the social mechanics of Bronze Age hospitality. And every physical detail of this mission carries spiritual meaning that enriches our understanding of what it means to be sent, to go, to carry the covenant through the material world. The journey that the servant is about to undertake from Canaan to the region of Nahor in Mesopotamia is approximately 500 miles. In the Bronze Age, without modern roads and with the caravan logistics of the early 2nd millennium BCE, such a journey would take between 30 and 40 days each way. The terrain includes the Negev highlands of southern Canaan, the Syrian steppe and semi-desert regions, the upper Euphrates valley, and the alluvial plains of northern Mesopotamia. The climate along this route is severe by modern standards and was even more demanding in the conditions of the Bronze Age. The summer temperatures in the Syrian desert can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. The nights in the highland sections can drop to near freezing even in the warmer months. Water sources are spaced sometimes 2 or 3 days of travel apart, and the ability to navigate between known wells was a matter of life and death for any significant caravan. The servant, identified in Jewish tradition as Eliezer of Damascus, would have been managing the logistics of a caravan of 10 camels, the text tells us later in verse 10. 10 camels. Let us pause and think about what that means physically and logistically. The domestic camel, Camelus dromedarius, the one-humped Arabian camel that was the primary pack animal of the ancient Near East, has a carrying capacity of approximately 300 to 400 kilograms, between 600 and 900 pounds, for sustained long-distance travel. 10 camels, therefore, represent a potential cargo capacity of between 3 and 4 tons of goods. This is not a small personal errand. This is a substantial diplomatic and commercial expedition. The goods that the servant carries include, as we learn from the later verses of chapter 24, gold, silver, and precious garments, gifts for the bride and her family, the equivalent of what the ancient Near Eastern marriage documents called the teirhatum, the bride gift, and the dowry-related gifts that would be expected in any significant inter-family covenant transaction. The physical weight of gold and silver in significant quantities, combined with the provisions necessary for a 40-day journey for the servant and presumably a team of assistant travelers, would have fully loaded the 10 camels. Each camel would have been equipped with a pack saddle, in the ancient world typically constructed from wooden frames covered with leather and padding, designed to distribute the load evenly across the animal's back while leaving the hump accessible as a fat storage reserve for the journey. The camels would need to be watered at every available well or spring, since a camel can consume up to 100 liters of water in a single drinking session and can cover much longer distances without water than any other pack animal of the ancient world, but still requires regular access to water sources to maintain the health and carrying capacity that the mission requires. The waterskins, in Hebrew the nod or the hamath, were essential to the survival of both animals and human travelers between water sources. Ancient waterskins were constructed from the entire hide of a goat, sheep, or calf, cured with tannin from tree bark, and sealed along all but one opening with stitching and natural resins such as pitch or beeswax. A well-constructed waterskin from goat hide could hold between 10 and 20 liters of water and could remain functional for months with careful maintenance. The weight of a full waterskin, between 10 and 20 kilograms, represented a significant additional burden for the camels, on top of the gold and provisions. The bread carried for the journey was typically a flat, dense unleavened variety that would harden into a rock-like consistency over the days of travel and would need to be soaked in water or oil before it could be eaten. This bread was, calorie for calorie, one of the most efficient and durable portable foods available in the ancient world, but its consumption required water that was already a precious resource on the journey. All of this physical detail serves a single spiritual point of extraordinary importance. Obedience is not an abstraction. Faith is not an airy, spiritual feeling that floats above the material world. The servant's faith is expressed in the weight of the waterskins, in the logistics of the caravan, in the care of the camels, in the navigation of the desert route, in the physical endurance of a 40-day journey through one of the most demanding landscapes on earth. This is what it means to be sent. Not to declare a spiritual commitment in a comfortable setting and then return to ordinary life, but to load the camels, to fill the waterskins, to pack the bread, to head out into the desert with the full physical weight of the mission bearing down on your shoulders and your back and your feet for 30 or 40 days, with the knowledge that the angel went before and the conviction that the God who swore to Abraham has not changed his character since the oath was spoken. The great missionary Hudson Taylor, who founded the China Inland Mission in 1865 and who carried the gospel into the most remote and inaccessible regions of inland China at enormous personal cost, expressed this dimension of faith with characteristic directness. He said that he had found there were 3 stages in great works undertaken for God. First, it is impossible. Then it is difficult. Then it is done. The servant loading the camels for the 500-mile journey into the unknown is in the second stage. The impossible stage was Abraham's childlessness for decades. The impossible stage was the declaration that God would provide a son. The difficult stage is this: loading the camels, filling the waterskins, heading into the desert with the full weight of the mission and the full uncertainty of the outcome. And the done stage is the arrival at the well, the prayer, the encounter with Rebecca, the return with the bride. But here is the crucial point. You cannot skip the difficult stage. You cannot get from the impossible to the done without the weight, the physical weight, the logistical weight, the daily endurance weight of the difficult. Faith that does not carry waterskins is not yet faith in the fullest biblical sense. It is aspiration. Faith becomes faith when it loads the camels and heads into the desert with the conviction that the angel has already gone before. Let us now enter the Nuzi tablet evidence in greater depth, because it illuminates the social and legal world of this mission with remarkable specificity. The Nuzi tablets, approximately 4,000 clay tablets discovered at the site of ancient Nuzi near modern Kirkuk in Iraq and dating to the 15th century BCE, provide a window into the family law and social practices of the Hurrian society that occupied northern Mesopotamia during the general period of the patriarchal narratives. Among the most significant Nuzi parallels to Genesis 24 is the evidence for what scholars call the adoption inheritance contract, a legal arrangement in which a childless person adopts a capable servant or slave as their legal heir, with the provision that if a biological son is subsequently born, the adopted servant heir will yield the inheritance to the biological son. This arrangement is precisely the background to the reference in Genesis 15, where Abraham says before Isaac's birth that the one who will inherit from him is Eliezer of Damascus, a member of his household. Eliezer's legal status in Abraham's household is therefore not merely that of a trusted senior employee. He is the legally recognized heir-apparent who has been displaced by the birth of Isaac. The implications for the psychological and spiritual dynamics of Genesis 24 are extraordinary. The man whom Abraham is sending on this mission, the man whose hand goes under the patriarch's thigh, is the man whose own inheritance claim was nullified by the very child he is now being sent to find a wife for. He has every human motivation for subtle sabotage, for unconscious resistance, for the kind of ambivalent half-heartedness that would allow the mission to fail without making the failure visible. And yet Eliezer goes. Without resentment, without complaint, without any visible shadow of the wound that the birth of Isaac must have inflicted on his personal ambitions and his sense of security. He goes with the full commitment of his loyalty, the full investment of his skill, the full dedication of his resources. He placed his hand under the thigh of the very man whose son displaced him, and he swears an oath of absolute fidelity to that son's future. This is one of the most astonishing acts of covenant loyalty in the entire biblical narrative. And it is a model for every person who has been displaced, overlooked, passed over, or had their legitimate expectations frustrated by circumstances beyond their control, and who must choose between the voice of resentment and the voice of covenant faithfulness. Eliezer chooses faithfulness. And in choosing it, he becomes the figure of the Holy Spirit, who has no mission of his own, who seeks no glory for himself, who does not speak from himself or about himself, but who pours everything into the glory of the Son and the gathering of the bride. Jesus describes the Holy Spirit in John 16 with words that could be a portrait of Eliezer. He will not speak on his own authority. He will not seek his own glory. He will take what is mine and declare it to you. The displaced heir becomes the type of the selfless spirit. The man who had every right to be bitter becomes the model of the servant who is most free. Because the freedom that comes from releasing the right to bitterness is one of the deepest freedoms available to the human soul. Is there a situation in your life in which you have been Eliezer? A situation in which you had legitimate expectations that were not met, in which you were displaced by circumstances or by the choices of others, in which you have the option of allowing the resentment to quietly shape your effort in ways that produce just enough failure to vindicate the injury you feel? Hear the voice of covenant faithfulness today. Eliezer did not allow the wound of displacement to compromise the mission. He loaded the camels. He filled the waterskins. He put his hand under the thigh. And he went. Let that be your answer to the wound of displacement today. Subscribe, like, share this video. Write to us at christ4life143@gmail.com. Stay tuned for the next video. Join us next time as we continue verse by verse.